And hi, good morning everybody. David Cross again. One more video update on my Mac address OUI viewer and the client class management capabilities I've added. All of this is pretty substantial, so the changes made I think are beneficial. And I'd like to kind of update that video series one last time and kind of complete that. So I guess the first thing is, for those who are just catching on to the video or seeing it now, the OUI text file, if I look at this full link here, is from the standards body in the IEEE that maintains all of the IANA numbers assigned to manufacturers of network equipment or other numbers. And this number that they provide and manage is tied to the MAC address, or the first 3 bytes of the 6-byte MAC. And it identifies specifically the vendor that is assigned to that particular OUI. So from a MAC address perspective, we can then track the prefix back to a vendor and identify what the card is. So the first thing I had in this series of products is the ability to just kind of quickly filter through data. Right-clicking sets a filter, and right-clicking again unsets the filter. I can do simple things like check for all Apple Mac addresses, and I'm going to show you a pretty neat trick with this in a minute. And then also things, if I want to look at others, resetting that, Cisco, and different types of equipment. So that's the first thing that we enable you to do there. The second thing is in terms of the MAC address filtering, if we wanted to paste a MAC address, the utility will convert that depending on whether it's a colon delimited, a hyphen delimited, or no delimiter. And to kind of demonstrate that, I do have a couple MAC addresses that I'm running here in my local ARP, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste that, which then will convert this into its OUI representation. That's the way that it's stored in this particular file. So I can now say that that's a Cisco device, which it should be my router in this environment. So that's kind of cool, and that's really all that was really meant to do. And I can go ahead and save out the OUI file. So I can do OUI, and let's do 2018. And I recommend that if you do download the file, go ahead and save it and reuse it. Don't keep going back to the site if not necessary. But once a week, probably update the files, because you'll see the MAC addresses change, and this has gone up over 100 in the last maybe last week since I've been looking at this. Now you'll also notice as part of the new viewer, there's the client class functionality, which is now in demo mode, and I will have the ability to enable and disable this. But it shows you whether you're online or offline in terms of management and connectivity. So I'm going to quickly just go to this tab, and it shows us that we're offline, kind of showing a red arrow around the connect sign here, and that we are offline here. And just note that this does require that if you connect online, that you have the Node-RED workflow that's developed for this, and either version 4 or 5. There are 2 out there, only 1 really. And version 5 is the latest, and probably will be updated by the time this video gets circulated again. But this is currently the latest. And what I've added effectively here is that when we do connect with the server, we go online and indicate that we are effectively online. I'm going to pop up a list of the different client classes that are available. And I've also added the filtering and the ability to query into the DHCP servers so that I can see what the server names, IP addresses, and types are, and also have this auto load whenever I go do some additional checks, as well as refreshing it at any time and closing the window. Right? So as I select a class, like I'm doing the XMAC pool, it then shows me what DHCP servers through that API are affected by this class. So if I had this pool assigned to 1 to 10 servers, it would all list in the list here automatically. So I know what these are going to be. And then if I modify these, I can also deploy these changes, which I'll come back to shortly. The default status is export, and it pulls up the IPC version from the workflow specifically. So it's pulling out with the client version and then the OU version of the application itself, but it populates this by a variable that's set. So in the export, we can quickly do the export, which with our OUI text file loaded, will now process all of our known MAC addresses against a known list of vendors. In terms of the MAC, it'll determine exact condition whenever it sees that it's a full MAC address. And if we get down into any of the client classes, you'll see that it has a begins match because it's only the prefix of that, or the OUI in this terms of the case. Now, I want to come back and show you this because let's say that you have a need to put some type of filter into a DHCP client class so that you can provide certain lease times or different options based on it being Apple as a vendor. I can then simply do a filter of Apple through all the known MAC addresses, and I'm going to click this button that says Copy Selected Vendor MAC Prefix. And that now has populated this MAC address field that we're going to use to import into the MAC pool. Matter of fact, let's create a new one that says Apple devices. And hit OK, and let's go ahead and add all of those vendors to the Apple devices. And we now have and are populating this different client class now, the new one, to any Apple devices, and I can go into IP control and set up the policies around these devices whenever they're seen in DHCP. So it's just as simple as that, and it's really beneficial. So a very nice thing to do, and we'll give it a few minutes or a second here to change and finish up. And of course, as it's adding these devices, by the way, in either add, delete, etc., it's also auditing this information. So one of the new capabilities I've also assigned to this is the ability to offline process whatever you're doing, say in a lab server or in an offline production server, to take that SQL representation of that, which I'm performing on the back end, and through the audits show you effectively everything that's being assigned, added, or updated, and even in its syntax and order. So I have here the create client class. I then went in and added all these different vendors to it. And if I go back in and delete the class or anything else, it's going to keep this in running perpetuity of whatever this session is. So whatever I do, as long as this application is open, it's going to say it's going to maintain this. And I can then save this out to a file. And then I can also, while I'm running an audit, in current active audit, I can load an additional audit and look back to it. And guess what? I can copy all these MAC addresses again. Let's say if I wanted to restore all of these that were deleted, I could restore and add those back to the pool. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to go ahead and clear this. I'm going to go ahead and this window keeps popping out of my frame of reference here. And I'm going to go ahead and copy all MACs. Well, actually, let's do one thing here. Let's do, I need to load my audit history again. Right, so these are all deletes. I'm going to go ahead and copy all the MACs, which is going to put it back into this table, and I'm going to add this back to the XMAC pool again. So let's say if they were all deleted, I would be able to add them back. I have already done this, so of course you see the errors, and then I'm going to go ahead and stop this because we don't need to process it. We know they're all there. All right, so those are a couple things that have changed that have been very beneficial. Now the other thing of it is here, let's go ahead and just delete one. Let's clear this contents here. Copy the current MAC, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this MAC, and that's going to go ahead and delete it. Now I have that this is a certain version of IP control, which is 10, which allows that when you update the MAC client classes, it triggers that this event is a changed resource or changed record. So what I can do here now, and I'm going to have to really change this and control it, is select the server, and I now interface to this through the API. So I can now process this and deploy the task so that it'll go out and run the task and deploy the changes and push the server. I'm going to have a lot more control over this, probably have a separate tab, look at monitoring the status and the states, and a few other things like adding these pools to the servers I'm going to have to do before I really get to that point. But as a simple way of testing in the lab, it's great for that purpose. And again, remember, you can copy things back and forth between these to help you out. The SQL I mentioned that everything we do here is being generated to an audit table. So I can go out and I can generate the SQL that's relative to this particular file. And that SQL has all the insert and delete or whatever statements are necessary to duplicate what I've done in this session. So in that SQL file itself, it'll actually give us all the details of, here's the insert, here's the delete, here's all the commands that ran. So I can literally sneakernet this file over to another server and run it to duplicate these sessions. So pretty interesting way of doing this and working through the list and so forth. And of course, this version's at actually more than this in the clients, a little bit greater than 93. But the server version is 0.05, where I'm doing all this functionality. All right, so that's the update, and that's where I'm at, and probably the last video for a while. And if you're interested in looking at the utility, number one, the Mac vendor utility and function is kind of, the freeware shareware portion of this. The client class manufacturer stuff is in a demo state right now. I will be licensed and it will have a server component. So I need to make sure we align this and get it worked to make sure it supports whatever environment you're in. So there's a lot of things I need to work out through those details. But if you have the application, if you have IP control, and you're interested in looking at it and running Node-RED and doing this, I'd be pleased to work with you and set that time up. So anyway, let me know if you have any details or questions to contact at IPDevNet.com. Take care, have a great day, and see you and talk to you soon.